Hello. Now that we've kind of been through the basics, I want to talk through some of the finer details around um, what happens when a territory value changes live. So a couple of things. I think everyone knows that speed to lead is very important. We're using our matched account data to route our leads. So not only do we want to be able to assign accounts quickly and to the correct person, we also need to be able to route leads quickly and to the correct person. So I want to talk a little bit about live in our system as it works today. In the last demo I showed you, right now we have a Zoom Info job that enriches accounts nightly. So when the new account was created, it gets created, an address, and employee count, it's going to be blank. It waits until that night, and then Zoom Info runs. And then after Zoom Info updates the address, remember how there was the next step where the nightly account job has to run and give us the segment. So sometimes we have, from creation, we have to wait 2 days before we actually get the information on the account to route it. If we wanted to speed that up, there are a couple of things we could do. Number one, Zoom Info also offers an instant enrich job, which enriches accounts in real time upon creation. So we could turn that on, and that would give us our address and employee count data immediately once the account's created. The second step is that segment field, which depends on the max family employees. So Zoom Info is going to give us an employee count, and then we take that and we calculate for all of the accounts that are in this hierarchy, what is the max? We currently do that in our nightly account job, but let's just imagine for a minute that we did that in real time as well. The segment is a formula field based off of this. So if we could get that in real time too, then we could basically have the entire thing and assign an account immediately after it's created. And that would speed up our lead routing as well. I think that would be possible. You would just want to look for any time the employee count changes on a record or the count of accounts within that hierarchy changes, then you'd need to recalculate the max. That way, if you had an account in one hierarchy and say there's 10 accounts in there, you move it to a different parent. Now you've got 9 in here and you have 1 more in here. So you would recalculate the max for both hierarchies. And that would give us real-time everything. Now, I think there are some situations where we may not want things to happen in real time, even though we say we want live. So I'm going to show you as it's set up right now, assuming we made that change to Zoom Info, we made that change to the nightly accounts job for max family employees. So let's say we got those 2 things going in real time. As it's set up now, this is actually going to change the territory live. So let's say this is the same account we looked at before. We had Zoom Info said it was in Pennsylvania. Let's say sales ops reviews that and they find out actually it's not in Pennsylvania, it's in Virginia. So I'm gonna put my sales ops hat on and I'm going to override the address. Okay. I'm going to click save. And remember, we had that button, that checkbox checked to evaluate the territory rules on every save. So when I save it, that's going to update the address. And it's also going to rerun the territory rules. And you can see down here, now we have a different territory than we had before and different users assigned in this new territory. So that's real time, but there's a catch, and the catch is record visibility. If we set it up to work like this, where everything happens real time live, then it also changes record visibility real time live. So as soon as this territory value changed, all of the users that could see that account before no longer can. We may not want that to happen in every situation. So we may need to think about our account movement policy that Jack talked about in a previous meeting. It may be when an account's newly created, yes, we want all of that to happen in real time, immediately live, boom, it's got a territory. It may be that if a prospect account has its address or employee count change, and nobody's working on it, there are no open opportunities, maybe that account is okay to move in real time. And then if it's a customer account or it has an open opportunity, maybe we don't want to move that in real time. Maybe we need a real live sales ops person to review it and make sure that we have the correct address, kind of like we do right now with our quarterly account reconciliation. So we can do that too. And it's all about how you write the rules. So let's imagine for a minute that up here in our admin override section of the page, maybe we have a checkbox that tells us, all right, we're going to override the address and we want to move this account right now. And then in our rules for the territory, we could go in and say that checkbox has to be true in order for this territory rule to evaluate as true. We could put it on all of them. We could put it on some of them. We could put fancier criteria. We could replicate some of what we had in TSP where we had the transfer date that sales ops would put in. So maybe in our rules here, we have something like transfer date has to be greater than today. And sales ops would go in there. If they want to move it now, they don't, it could be greater than equal to today. So if they want to move it now, they don't write any, or they put today's date. If they don't want it to move until tomorrow or until end of quarter, they put a future date, et cetera. We could figure out what we need to do with the rules if we decide on that account movement policy in advance. So that's one thing I wanted to talk through, what live really means. Second thing I want to talk about is here on these rules, we have talked in the past about globalization and how in our current territory model, we're assigning everything based on the UPA address, but maybe in the future, we might not want to do that. The classic example is Toyota, where the headquarters is in Japan. If we write rules based on the UPA address, the way we're doing now, then that entire hierarchy will go to the Japan territory. But let's say we want to assign the Toyota North America accounts to our North American rep, not to our Japanese rep. In that case, we may want to write some rules based on account level address. We could do a mix. We could, if we want to keep whole hierarchies together, we write on UPA. If we want to split hierarchies, we write on account level address. We could do kind of a hybrid where we have a checkbox to say on this hierarchy, on this particular account, we want it to use the account level rule rather than the UPA rule. There are all sorts of possibilities. It's just all comes down to how we write the rules and which fields they're based on. Last thing I want to talk about is our opportunity stamping. So right now we have manually maintained user values on each user record, which we stamp onto opportunities, and that tells us who gets credit for a deal. You can also have territories show up on opportunities the way they do on accounts here, but it takes Apex code, so I cannot demo that for you. But let's just imagine a world where, okay, now we are managing our named accounts within here, right? So we'll have in this territory, let's do the, we've got an account that's geographically located in Georgia. We want it to be managed by a New York rep. So the way we're going to do that in enterprise territory management is on the New York territory, we're going to add that account. So when we look at that account now, its territory value is going to be New York, along with all of the other New York accounts. This is different from what we currently have in account demographics, where we have mismatched values. So what that means is if we were to expose the territory values on the opportunity record, that would pretty much work for telling us who gets credit for this account for named accounts and non-named accounts. The one situation where it doesn't work in is holdover opportunities. So if the opportunity is held by somebody who is not the current account owner, the current territory owner, then we would need to exclude those opportunities. There's a checkbox you can put in to exclude certain opportunities from running the territory rules. So on those, maybe what we would do is stamp the territory onto the opportunity at the time of close, unless it's a holdover. And in that case, maybe we would stamp the op owner user role. And if we were to clean up our role hierarchy, we could use that instead of the manually managed user values. And so then maybe we can get rid of that part potentially. The user values right now are doing two things. One is all of our safe visibility access. A lot of that is based on stamped user values. That part will go away if we do our access through here. The second thing the user values are doing is telling us who gets credit for a deal. So if we potentially stamped our territory name and or the role hierarchy name onto the opportunity instead, I think that might take care of the needs there. That's something that we need further testing. And I think the only other thing I would say about the role hierarchy is that it should describe, I believe, who reports to whom. It doesn't necessarily have to completely mirror our territory naming. So in this example, I touched briefly in the last video about how on our current single source of truth spreadsheet, we have a tab for large industry. So sometimes we're assigning things based on zip codes, and sometimes we're assigning things based on industry. I've got another territory model in here that we could look at. There are different ways you could set that up, but let's just say this hierarchical model may not always go segment, geo, region, area, territory, because sometimes we're using different criteria for determining what the territory is. So maybe we have a layer here under large, that's large industry, and then we have some territories under that. Right now in our current model, we sometimes assign accounts to a territory based on industry, and then accounts to that exact same territory based on zip code. So what we can do in here is we can keep the territory name consistent. It can still be segment, geo, region, area, territory, but you can have a territory type that tells you, okay, for the records that meet this particular rule were assigned to this territory because of industry. The records that meet the other rule were assigned to the territory because of geography. So you can use this to kind of give you reporting to tell you why an account went to the territory. And we can think through a little bit more about what we want that to look like. But our hierarchy doesn't have to be strictly segment, geo, region, area. However, when we get to the naming of the actual territory, that's probably more where the naming matters, the naming conventions at the bottom. And then the role hierarchy doesn't necessarily have to completely mirror the territory name. So one of the things that they say in best practices for ETM is that you should think of those two things separately. The role hierarchy is who reports to whom, and the territory hierarchy is how an account gets assigned to a territory. So for example, let's just say let's take one of these teams and say, okay, all right, well, the manager for this area is not going to report to APAC anymore. We're going to move that over and have it be part of EMEA. In that case, we probably would want to change our naming because we're changing an area. If, on the other hand, we have, we want to have temporarily, let's say, all right, we're going to try a new thing. We're going to have these 3 sales reps report to a different manager temporarily so we can try out something. In that case, we might just move them in the role hierarchy under the person that's going to manage them, but we may not always need to adjust territory naming. We might need to adjust users on territories to make sure they can see the right things, but the territory naming doesn't necessarily have to change in every case. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm sure there are a lot of different scenarios that could play out differently there, but that's just some thoughts around opportunity stamping and what we want to stamp. Thank you very much.